My coworker stole my idea and got a promotion, so I secretly added a time bomb bug to the project and revealed it after he presented to the board of directors. You know the type. Every office has one. He's the guy with the perfect hair, the dazzling smile, and a vocabulary built entirely from corporate buzzwords he picked up from a LinkedIn influencer's webinar. He can talk about synergy, paradigm shifts, and leveraging core competencies until your ears bleed. But if you asked him to write a single line of functional code, he'd probably try to Google it and end up installing 3 different kinds of malware. In our office, that guy's name was Josh, and I'm Eleanor. I was, at the time, a mid-level software developer at a fintech company. I'm what you might call a true believer. I don't just write code, I craft it. I find elegance in a well-structured algorithm, a deep satisfaction in a clean, commented script. I'd been working here for about 4 years, quietly and diligently building a reputation as the go-to person for tough problems. My performance reviews were always stellar, filled with words like reliable, efficient, and thorough. I was the workhorse, the one who stayed late to fix a critical bug, the one who actually read the documentation. Josh, on the other hand, was a peacock. He'd transferred into our department about a year before everything went down. He arrived with a resume that was impressive on paper, but thin on actual, verifiable accomplishments. He was a master of perception. In meetings, he'd listen intently, nodding with a pensive look on his face. He'd wait for someone, usually me, to present a nascent idea or a solution to a minor problem. Then, he'd rephrase it. He'd wrap my simple, practical idea in a layer of glossy jargon, add a PowerPoint slide with a lot of arrows, and present it as a grand strategic vision. So to piggyback on Eleanor's initial thought, he'd say, making it sound like my contribution was merely a quaint little stepping stone to his genius, what we should be doing is creating a holistic, cross-functional data pipeline to optimize our workflow synergy. He just said what I said, but with more syllables, and our boss Gary would eat it up. Gary was the kind of manager who was perpetually out of his depth. He'd been promoted to head of department based on seniority, not skill. He managed people, not projects, and his understanding of the technical side of our work was superficial at best. He was easily swayed by confidence and a firm handshake. And, let's be honest, I think he had a bit of a blind spot. I was a woman in a male-dominated field. In his mind, I was a competent pair of hands, a good little coder. Josh, with his booming voice and talk of disruption, looked like a leader to him. I let the small things slide. Josh would borrow a clever function I wrote for a minor script and casually mention it in a team-wide email. He'd take a bug report I'd analyzed and present the findings as his own in the weekly stand-up. Each time, it was a small sting, a minor injustice. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. It was just office politics, and I was a builder, not a politician. I preferred the quiet certainty of my code editor to the murky battleground of corporate maneuvering. That was my mistake. I was letting him build a ladder to success on the rungs of my hard work, and I didn't realize he was planning to kick me off once he got to the top. The beginning of the end started with a whisper of an idea. It was a problem that had been nagging at the back of my mind for months. Our company processed millions of microtransactions, and our data validation and reconciliation system was an archaic beast, inefficient, slow, and costing us a fortune in server overhead and man-hours. We were literally burning money just to check our own work. The idea, when it finally crystallized, was beautiful in its simplicity and staggering in its potential. A new validation architecture, built on asynchronous processing and predictive analysis. It would be faster, smarter, and more accurate. My back-of-the-napkin calculations suggested it could save the company, conservatively, 7 figures a year, maybe more. This wasn't just a project. It was my magnum opus. I named it Odyssey. For the next 3 months, Odyssey became my life. I didn't just work on it from 9 to 5. I worked on it on the train ride home. I worked on it after dinner, with a cup of tea steaming next to my laptop. I spent weekends not with friends, but with frameworks and databases, sketching out architecture diagrams on a whiteboard in my spare bedroom. I wrestled with complex algorithms, celebrated small breakthroughs with a fist pump in my empty apartment, and poured every ounce of my skill and passion into its code. I was building a cathedral, and every line of code was a perfectly placed stone. Slowly, miraculously, it started to come to life. I had a working prototype. It was raw, the user interface was non-existent, but the core engine, the engine was a thing of beauty. It chewed through test data sets that would make our current system choke and spit out perfect results in a fraction of the time. I was ecstatic. I was proud. And in my excitement, I made a fatal error. At our next team meeting, brimming with the kind of pure, unadulterated pride that only comes from creating something from nothing, I decided to share my work. So I've been working on something in my spare time, I began, my voice trembling slightly with nervous energy. I connected my laptop to the projector. It's a new concept for our data reconciliation process. I'm calling it Project Odyssey. I walked them through the architecture. I showed them the performance metrics. I ran a live demo on a sample dataset, and the results appeared on the screen almost instantaneously. The room was quiet. I could see the gears turning in my colleagues' heads. Gary, my boss, looked impressed, if a little confused. "So, this is faster?" he asked, squinting at the screen. "It's about 50 times faster, Gary," I said. "And the server resource usage is less than 10% of the current system." Then Josh spoke up. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with an intensity I mistook for intellectual curiosity. "This is fascinating, Eleanor. Truly. How are you handling the data stream ingestion? Is it scalable? What about security protocols for the predictive module?" He fired off a dozen questions. They were smart, incisive questions. I spent the next 10 minutes eagerly explaining the intricacies of my design, laying out every secret, every clever solution I had devised. I was so happy to be talking about it, so thrilled that someone seemed to grasp the scale of what I had built, that I didn't see the truth. He wasn't admiring my cathedral. He was measuring it for a new set of locks. 2 weeks later, an email landed in my inbox from Gary. Subject: exciting new initiative and leadership opportunity. The email announced the creation of a new role, Senior Tech Lead. This person would spearhead a major strategic initiative that had been, quote, by the board, and was poised to revolutionize our core business operations. My heart started to pound. This was it. My work, my late nights, my odyssey, it was being recognized. Gary called a department-wide meeting an hour later. We all gathered in the main conference room. The air was thick with anticipation. "As you all know," Gary began, beaming, "our core value is all about innovation. It's in our name. And it's my pleasure to announce that one of our own has been developing a groundbreaking project that will secure our position as an industry leader for years to come." He paused for dramatic effect. I held my breath, a smile already forming on my face. "I'd like to invite Josh to come up and tell you all about his vision." The world seemed to slow down. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Josh?" I watched, numb, as he stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and strode to the front of the room with the confidence of a conquering hero. He plugged in his laptop, and my blood ran cold. On the screen was a slick, professionally designed PowerPoint presentation. The title slide read, "Project Odyssey, a new paradigm in data reconciliation, a strategic initiative by Joshua R. Evans." He had even kept the name. He spoke for 20 minutes, using the exact concepts I had explained, the same potential savings I had calculated. He used my architecture diagrams, but he'd had them redrawn by the marketing department to be shinier, with more drop shadows. He never mentioned my name. He talked about the long nights and early mornings he had spent ideating this solution from the ground up. He presented my work, my passion, my soul as his own. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Gary looked like a proud father. The announcement was a formality. Josh was officially promoted to Senior Tech Lead. Effective immediately. The project, his project, was his to command. The final, soul-crushing blow came in a private meeting with Gary later that day. "Eleanor, great news," he said, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "I'm assigning you to Josh's team. You'll be his lead developer on Odyssey. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to see a project through to completion and learn some leadership skills from Josh. He speaks very highly of your technical abilities." I just sat there, my mouth opening and closing like a fish. I was being asked to build my own cathedral and then hand the keys to the man who had stolen the blueprints, all while being told it was a learning experience. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, bitter acid rising in my throat. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a single, jerky motion. For the first 48 hours, I was a ghost. I went through the motions, my mind a maelstrom of rage and despair. I drafted my resignation letter a dozen times. I fantasized about storming into the CEO's office. I considered keying Josh's stupidly expensive German sedan. But I knew it was useless. It would be my word against the company's newly anointed golden boy. Josh had played the game perfectly. He had the slides, the title, the backing of our boss. I had, what? A bunch of code on my personal laptop? They'd say I was a disgruntled employee, jealous of his success. Gary's subtle sexism would suddenly become a lot less subtle. They'd paint me as hysterical. Quitting felt like letting him win, letting him take my masterpiece and ride it to glory while I just disappeared. No. The anger was starting to burn away the despair, forging something new in its place, something cold, hard, and sharp. The turning point came during the official knowledge transfer session. It was just me and Josh in a small meeting room. He was trying to sound authoritative, asking me to walk him through the code base. So this module here, he said, pointing a manicured finger at a particularly complex part of the predictive algorithm on my screen, just give me the high-level overview of the logic flow. And that's when I saw it, the look in his eyes. It wasn't the look of a manager trying to understand his project. It was the blank, uncomprehending stare of a tourist looking at a map in a foreign language. He had no idea what he was looking at. He had stolen the car, but he didn't know how the engine worked. He couldn't even drive stick. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled in days. He didn't need to be sabotaged. He didn't need to be exposed. I just needed to give him enough rope, and his own incompetence would do the rest. But that wasn't enough. It wasn't just about him failing. It was about justice. It was about my name being attached to my work. The plan that began to form in my mind was not one of destruction, but of reclamation. It was intricate, it was risky, and it was beautiful. I was going to build a bomb, a logic bomb. The beauty of the bomb was that it wouldn't be a bug. A bug is a mistake, an error. This would be a feature. A hidden, exquisitely designed security feature. It would be my signature, hidden in the heart of my own creation. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the loyal subordinate. I dutifully transferred the code to the company's repository. I wrote documentation. I answered Josh's increasingly idiotic questions. He'd ask things like, "Can we make this button a different shade of blue?" while completely ignoring the fundamental architectural decisions that made the whole thing work. He was busy with the paint job while I was reinforcing the foundations. And late at night, on my own time, I built the bomb. It was a masterpiece of stealth. A small, elegant script, buried deep within a core library, obfuscated to look like a standard error handling routine. It had 3 distinct triggers that all had to be met for it to detonate. Trigger condition 1, the environment. The script would only arm itself if the program was running in a specific live presentation mode. This was a mode I had built into the original prototype to allow for dynamic, real-time data visualization during demos. It was flashy, impressive, and I knew with absolute certainty that Josh the showman would use it for his big presentation to the board. Any other mode, development, testing, standard production, and the bomb would remain completely inert. Trigger condition 2, the action. The bomb would only detonate when a specific function was called. Not just any function, but the grand finale. The final comprehensive analysis. This was the function that aggregated all the data, ran the most complex predictive models, and spat out the final multi-million-dollar savings projection. It was the money shot. The climax of the whole presentation. There was no way he wouldn't click that button. Trigger condition 3, the identity. This was the heart of the whole thing. This was the justice. The script would perform a metadata cross-check. It would silently query the Git repository's log files. For those who don't know, Git is a version control system. It keeps a meticulous, unforgeable record of every single change made to the code, and, crucially, who made it. The bomb would check the authorship of the core modules, the engine of Odyssey. And if the user who was logged into the system and running the presentation was not the author of at least 90% of that core code, the bomb would go off. And what was the payload? What happened when it exploded? It wouldn't crash the program, it wouldn't delete any data, that would be crude. No, my bomb was a weapon of pure, unadulterated humiliation. When triggered, it would hijack the display output. It would kill the fancy graphs and charts. And in their place, it would render a single, massive message across the entire screen, in a brilliant, impossible-to-ignore shade of crimson. The text would read, "Intellectual property, authentication, failure. Warning, the author of core module, core_module_ v2.1 does not match the presenter. Hotspins. To ensure data integrity and copyright protection, please contact the original author for verification. Eleanor Vance." And then there is my email address. I put my full name on it. My name. Right there, for the entire board of directors to see. Committing that code was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of my career. It was a single line in a log of thousands, a digital needle in a haystack. I buried it in a routine update, labeled minor bug fixes and performance tweaks. Josh approved the merge request without even looking at it. The bomb was planted. The timer was set. All I had to do was wait. The day of the board meeting felt like something out of a movie. The air in the office was electric. This wasn't just a project update. It was the unveiling of the company's next big thing. Investors were dialed in. The CEO, a formidable man named Mr. Harrison, whom I'd only ever seen in company-wide town halls, was flying in for it. The meeting was held in the main boardroom on the top floor, the one with the panoramic city views and the ridiculously long mahogany table. I found a seat in the back row, a small, insignificant developer in a room full of suits. My heart was a drum solo against my ribs. I felt strangely calm, the way you feel in the eye of a hurricane. I had done the work. The code was the code. The outcome was now in the hands of the digital gods and Josh's monumental ego. Josh strode in like he owned the place. He was wearing a new suit that probably cost more than my rent. He shook hands. He laughed, his booming laugh. He exuded an aura of complete and utter confidence. He caught my eye for a second and gave me a condescending little wink, as if to say, "Thanks for your help, little lady. The grown-ups will take it from here." He began his presentation. It was even more grandiose than the one he'd given to the department. He talked about his vision. He spoke of his tireless dedication. He used phrases like disrupting the industry and a quantum leap in fintech. He was a maestro of bullshit, and the board was his captive audience. I watched Mr. Harrison, the CEO, lean forward, a look of genuine impressiveness on his face. Gary, my boss, was practically glowing with pride, basking in the reflected glory of his protege. I felt a pang of doubt. What if I was wrong? What if I had miscalculated? This was my career on the line. If this went sideways, I wouldn't just be fired. I'd be blacklisted. Then Josh moved to the live demo. He switched the program to live presentation mode. Click, the first trigger was armed. He walked them through the various features, showing off the sleek user interface he'd spent weeks designing while I was building the engine. He saved the best for last. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice swelling with theatrical importance, "the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's see what Odyssey can really do. Let's quantify the revolution." He moved his cursor over the button, the big one, the one labeled Run Final Comprehensive Analysis. Click. The second trigger was armed. He clicked the button. For a fraction of a second, everything was normal. A loading icon appeared. Josh stood there, a smug, triumphant smile on his face, ready to receive his standing ovation. And then it happened. The screen flickered. The loading icon vanished, and the entire 10-foot projection screen was flooded with brilliant, blood-red light. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. Every single person, from the junior VPs to the CEO himself, was leaning forward, squinting at the giant wall of text. Intellectual property authentication failure. Warning, the author of core module, v2.1, does not match the presenter. To ensure data integrity and copyright protection, please contact the original author for verification. Eleanor Vance. I watched Josh's face. The smug triumph drained away, replaced by a wave of confusion, then dawning horror, then pure, undiluted panic. His skin went from tan to a pasty, sickly white. "What the?" he muttered into his microphone, his voice a strangled whisper. He frantically started clicking the mouse, trying to close the window. But I had designed it to be persistent. Every time he closed it, it reappeared a millisecond later, flashing angrily. "It's just a technical glitch, a minor bug," he stammered, his voice cracking. The sweat was beading on his forehead. "The system is probably just under load." The CEO, Mr. Harrison, turned his head slowly, his gaze fixing on my boss, Gary. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a shard of ice. "Gary," he said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Who is Eleanor Vance?" Gary looked like a deer in the headlights. His eyes darted around the room, finally landing on me in the back row. Every head in the room turned to follow his gaze. I was suddenly in the spotlight. This was my moment. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. I took a deep breath and raised my hand, calm and steady. "I'm Eleanor Vance, sir," I said, my voice clear and even. "I believe I can help with that. It appears to be a security feature I integrated to protect the project's intellectual property." A murmur went through the room. Mr. Harrison stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Get up here, Ms. Vance," he commanded. The walk from the back of the room to the podium felt a mile long. I was acutely aware of every eye on me. Josh scrambled out of the way as I approached the laptop, refusing to meet my gaze. I sat down in the chair that was still warm from his failure. The fix, of course, was theater. I opened a terminal window and typed a few lines of meaningless commands, making it look like I was performing complex diagnostics. In reality, I was just running a simple script to disable the logic bomb. I hit enter. Instantly, the red warning vanished. In its place, the correct screen appeared. A beautiful, intricate dashboard of charts and graphs displaying the final, staggering savings projection, the real results of my work. Mr. Harrison stared at the screen, then at me. "Explain," he said. "It wasn't a request." So I did. I didn't accuse. I didn't have to. I just stated facts. Project Odyssey's architecture is built on a series of interdependent core modules, sir. I began, my voice steady. The security protocol that triggered is a failsafe I embedded early in the development cycle. It cross-references the Git commit logs to verify that the person running a live executive-level analysis is the authenticated primary developer of those core modules. It's designed to prevent unauthorized or misrepresented use of the company's core IP. It seems there was a credential mismatch. I didn't need to say whose credentials matched. The Git logs were the objective, immutable truth. I took the opportunity to walk the CEO through the real architecture, explaining the nuances of the code. answering his sharp, technical questions with ease. I showed him the work, my work. In 5 minutes, I demonstrated a level of understanding that Josh, in his 20-minute presentation of bluster and stolen slides, could never have faked. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mr. Harrison declared the meeting over. He told Josh, Gary, and me to remain. The moment the door closed, leaving the three of us with the CEO and the company's chief technology officer, the atmosphere turned glacial. An internal investigation was launched immediately. It wasn't much of an investigation. The head of IT took about 10 minutes to pull the complete Git history for Project Odyssey. It was an open and shut case, written in the digital stone of the commit logs. 95% of the code was authored by Avance. The other 5% was authored by Jevons and consisted almost entirely of minor changes to CSS files, literally changing the color of buttons, and edits to the text on the UI. The evidence was irrefutable. Josh was fired. Not just fired, but terminated for cause, for gross misconduct, misrepresentation of work, and actions that caused severe reputational risk to the company. Security escorted him out of the building that same afternoon, carrying his belongings in a sad little cardboard box. I didn't watch him go. Gary, my boss, received a formal written reprimand for gross negligence and a failure of management oversight. He was stripped of his senior title and effectively demoted. He never looked me in the eye again. 2 days later, I was called into the CTO's office. Mr. Harrison was there too. The CTO, a woman I had always respected named Dr. Aris, got straight to the point. Eleanor, she said, on behalf of the company, I want to offer you our sincerest apologies. What happened was a complete failure of our process and our management. It should never have happened. Mr. Harrison nodded. Your work on Odyssey is brilliant, Ms. Vance. Truly innovative. The security feature, while unorthodox in its deployment, he said, a slight smile touching his lips, was, in principle, exactly the kind of proactive asset protection we should be encouraging. And then came the offer. They didn't just give me the senior tech lead position, they officially renamed the project in my honor. They gave me full autonomy, my own team, and a budget that made my eyes water. They also gave me a significant raise and a one-time bonus that was, as the CTO put it, a retroactive payment for the intellectual property you developed and so cleverly protected. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. The feeling was indescribable. It was vindication. It was justice. It was the sweet, satisfying taste of a victory well earned. The system that had been so easily gamed by a charismatic fraud had, in the end, been corrected by an undeniable truth. A truth I had written myself into the very heart of the code. I worried for a moment that I had gone too far. But then I remembered the feeling of sitting in that meeting, watching him take credit for my soul, and I knew I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So to my fellow developers out there, the quiet ones, the builders, the ones who live in the code, let your work speak for itself, but if it can't, build it a megaphone. And always, always, make sure your commits have a meaningful message. You never know when you'll need them to tell your story.